What's up, Raider Nation? Today we're diving into the latest buzz surrounding left tackle Colton Miller. Is he staying in Vegas with a new contract extension, or could he actually be on the trade block? We've got all the latest right here. Plus, NFL insider Aaron Wilson recently shared his thoughts on tight end Michael Mayer in an interview with Jeremy Chuggs. You'll definitely want to hear what he had to say. And make sure you stick around until the end of the show. We've got some major NFL draft news that could shake up the quarterback landscape heading into 2025. All right, let's jump into the first big story. Could the Las Vegas Raiders actually trade Colton Miller this offseason? We're giving this rumor just one just win, baby. In other words, not very likely. I'm confident saying that the Raiders will not trade Colton Miller, but calling it a 0% chance? That might be a stretch. Realistically, there's maybe a 5% chance they move on from him. About the same odds as them drafting Shedder Sanders at number 6 overall. Raiders beat writer Vincent Bonsignore recently hinted that the team could consider parting ways with Miller. And when assistant GM John Spytek was asked about the extension rumors, he shut it down quickly, saying, "We're just not going to talk about that kind of stuff." Personally, I'm glad they're keeping things quiet. With the draft coming up, it's smart not to tip your hand. Let the rest of the league guess what you're thinking. Now here's what we know. Colton Miller has been seeking a new deal, not just this offseason, but even last year. At that time, he had zero guaranteed money left on the final 2 years of his contract, but he didn't push for an extension because he was still recovering from a shoulder injury. Now, healthy and back in form, he's ready to negotiate. Bonsignore added that this is the second straight year Miller enters the offseason without a guaranteed salary. If not for his rehab last year, there's a good chance he would have pushed for a new deal then too. Is there some concern? Sure. It's fair to wonder if Miller's time in silver and black is starting to wind down. But honestly, it feels more like the Raiders are simply locked in on the upcoming draft, and everything else, contract talks included, is on hold for now. The Raiders seem to be taking a wait until after the draft approach when it comes to contract decisions for both Colton Miller and Jakobi Meyers. And honestly, that makes sense. They know these moves will get done. But right now, all eyes are on the draft. Vincent Bonsignore continued his insight on Miller, stating that as of now, there have been no contract discussions. That doesn't mean talks won't happen, it just means they haven't started yet. Still, it's raising a few eyebrows around the league. NFL insiders have pointed out that the Raiders have plenty of cap space, so the fact that no talks have started yet might hint at something bigger. Maybe the team is rethinking its long-term plans at left tackle. It's important to remember, Miller was a priority for the previous front office. If those decision-makers were still in charge, extending Miller would likely be near the top of their to-do list. But this is a new regime now, and their priorities might look different. So here's a question for you, Raider Nation. If you were in charge, would you keep Colton Miller or trade him? Drop a K for keep or T for trade in the comments. Here's my take. If the Raiders don't plan to extend Colton Miller, they will almost certainly trade him. He wants a new contract, and honestly, he's earned it. When I read Bonsignore's comment suggesting it's conspicuous that no conversations have happened yet, I didn't see it that way. I don't think most Raiders fans are concerned either. If anything, reports like this might be creating more noise than necessary. Let's zoom out for a second. What have the Raiders been focused on this offseason? Simple. Quarterback and the draft. They made a splash by bringing in Geno Smith and locking him up with an extension. Now, with the draft just a week away, their attention is fully on building through those picks. Contract decisions for Colton Miller and Jakobi Meyers? That'll come after the draft, and I believe the team will get it done. Keep an eye out, because if something happens with Colton Miller or Jakobi Meyers, it's likely going down after the NFL draft. Now, let's shift gears and talk about some interesting trade buzz surrounding Michael Mayer. Jeremy Chuggs recently sat down with NFL insider Aaron Wilson for an interview, and he dropped some intriguing info that Raiders fans need to hear. So, could the Raiders really trade Michael Mayer? I'm giving this rumor one just win, baby. So again, not likely. But there's a little more smoke here than with Colton Miller. I'd say there's around a 20% chance Mayer gets moved. In that interview, Wilson said he hasn't heard much about Mayer being shopped. That caught my attention because earlier this offseason, there were reports that trade discussions had started. In fact, at one point, it went from, "The Raiders are shopping Mayer," to, "They're just listening to offers," all within the span of an hour. If it were up to me, I'd keep Mayer in the building, period. Now, the reason this conversation even exists could be tied to Brock Bowers. He's widely considered the top tight end in the 2024 draft, and if the Raiders land him, Mayer could find himself in a tough spot. There's a sense that Mayer, despite being a second-round pick, would have a 0% chance of overtaking Bowers as TE1. That might feel like a harsh take on Mayer, but hey, if he steps up and proves he's better than Bowers, that could completely change the outlook for this team, maybe even push them toward real playoff potential. Now, speaking of trade value, another tight end to watch is Dallas Goedert. His name has been floating around in draft day trade rumors, and if he gets dealt, Raiders fans should pay attention. Why? Because whatever that deal looks like could set the benchmark for Mayer's value. So here's the big question. Will the Raiders trade Michael Mayer? Let me know in the comments, yes or no, and be specific. We asked earlier about Colton Miller, so make sure to clarify this answer is for Mayer. My take? I don't think the Raiders should trade him. Mayer is still young, entering his third season, and I'm not convinced we've seen him in a system that truly plays to his strengths. He's versatile, reliable, and there's still a ton of upside. Now, if Mayer wants out, or if a team comes calling and offers something like a third-round pick, then yeah, the Raiders might make that move. But unless that happens, I say keep him and see what he can become. Honestly, even if it was just a fourth-round pick, I think the Raiders would say, all right, Mike, appreciate you, best of luck. And they'd likely turn around and use that pick in this year's draft. But here's what I'm really paying attention to: relationships. That's something John Spytek talked about recently, how much this front office values relationships, team chemistry, and players who genuinely love football. And it's not just front office talk. Ashton Genie said the same thing this week. He felt like the Raiders were the kind of organization that values character and connection. And if that's true, let me ask this. Why would they be looking to move Michael Mayer? Here's something interesting. The Raiders didn't meet with a single tight end at the Combine, not one during pro day visits, not a single tight end during their top 30 prospect meetings. What does that tell you? To me, that says they like their tight end room, and they should. With Brock Bowers and Michael Mayer, the Raiders might quietly have one of the best young TE duos in the NFL. All right, let's move on to the final topic in today's show. This one about the NFL draft and a potential shakeup at quarterback. Let's talk about Jalen Milroe. Here's the rumor. Milroe is going to be drafted ahead of Jackson Dart. Surprised? You might be, but I'm giving this 1-2 just win babies. People around the league are definitely talking. Now, if you haven't been following this closely, Jackson Dart originally committed to attending the NFL draft in person, but now he's backed out. That alone doesn't mean he won't go in the first round, but it does suggest he's heard something that's making him second-guess that trip. And if Dart starts to slide, you could see a chain reaction with other quarterbacks dropping, which might just help the Raiders, who I believe are looking to take a quarterback on day 3. Some people think Quinn Ewers might go earlier, but I still think the Silver and Black are going to stay patient and scoop up a QB late, especially if guys start slipping. One name to watch? Shedeur Sanders. I know that might sound wild to some folks, but I don't think Shedeur is a lock for round 1 anymore. He's rubbed a few teams the wrong way, and there's real uncertainty about his long-term upside, and he's not the only one. Michael Williams, edge rusher from Georgia, he was supposed to attend the draft in person. He's now backing out too. On the flip side, Maxwell Hairston is now attending, which likely means a team has told him he's going earlier than expected. Now let's talk about who is attending the draft. On offense, players like Ashton Jeanty, Travis Hunter, Matthew Golden, Teteroa McMillan, Will Campbell, Josh Simmons, and Tyler Booker will all be there. On defense, Abdul Carter, Shamar Stewart, Mason Graham, Jihad Campbell, Will Johnson, Maxwell Hairston, and Malachi Starks. As for Raider targets, Ashton Jeanty is obviously one to circle. So is Will Campbell, especially if the Raiders hold tight at pick 6. Also, don't rule out Mason Graham or Tyler Booker, especially if the Raiders try to trade up from pick 37 to get a guy they love. Booker at the end of round 1 would be an exciting fit, and if he falls to 37, the Raiders need to jump. He's got the game, the leadership, and the locker room presence this team is building around. All right, y'all, that's going to do it for today's rumors and draft buzz. So make sure those notifications are turned on. Sub if you haven't already. And as always, appreciate every single one of you that pulled up today.